If you have natural hair and you've ever flat ironed it, then you already know this is one of those things that can make your hair look absolutely beautiful or leave you regretting it for weeks. Because let's be honest, a lot of people don't actually have a flat iron problem. They have a process problem. The flat iron gets blamed, but the real damage usually starts way before the plates ever touch the hair. It starts with product buildup. It starts with wet hair that wasn't fully dried. It starts with too much heat, too many passes, too much tension, too much impatience, and not enough understanding of what natural hair actually needs. And that's what I want to talk about in this video. I want to walk you through exactly how I flat iron my natural hair in a way that helps me get it sleek, smooth, soft, and polished without making it look stiff, dry, brittle, or fried. And I also want to show you the mindset behind it, because the biggest difference between healthy, flat ironed natural hair and damaged, flat ironed natural hair usually comes down to one thing: respect. You have to respect natural hair. Natural hair is incredibly beautiful, incredibly versatile, and incredibly easy to damage if you don't understand how it behaves. So if you've ever wondered why one person can flat iron their hair and it still looks full, healthy, and bouncy, while someone else ends up with thin ends, frizz, breakage, and heat damage, this is exactly what you need to understand. Because the goal is not just straight hair. The goal is healthy hair that happens to be straight temporarily. That's a huge difference. A lot of people approach flat ironing natural hair like they're trying to defeat it. They're trying to force it into submission. They want it to be as flat as possible, as fast as possible, no matter what it costs. And that mindset is where the trouble starts. Because natural hair is not supposed to be bullied into smoothness. It needs to be prepared, supported, and handled strategically. And once you understand that, everything changes. Now, before I even get into what I do, I want to say this very clearly. I do not think flat ironing your natural hair is automatically bad. I also don't think it's automatically safe. It depends on how you do it. That's the truth. A lot of people want simple answers like heat is bad or this one product will protect your hair from everything. But hair doesn't work that way. It's more nuanced than that. You can damage your hair with one careless session, and you can also maintain healthy hair over time if you use heat intelligently. So I'm going to show you the approach that makes the biggest difference for me. The first thing I do before flat ironing my natural hair is I make sure my hair is actually worth flat ironing. And what I mean by that is this. If my hair is already feeling weak, breaking more than usual, overly dry, or my ends are clearly in bad shape, that is not the time to apply heat. A lot of people use heat to try to make unhealthy hair look healthier. And the problem is, heat can temporarily make damaged hair look smoother, shinier, and more polished, while quietly making the underlying problem worse. That's why I always check in with my hair first. How does it feel? How are the ends looking? Is it shedding normally? Or is it snapping? Does it feel soft but strong, or soft and mushy? Does it feel dry and rough? Because if the foundation is off, the flat iron won't fix that. It will only expose it. And that is one of the hardest truths in hair care. Heat reveals the truth. If your hair is in good shape, it usually shows. If your hair is overloaded, weak, split, or stressed, that usually shows too. So once I know my hair is in a decent place, I start with the most important part of the whole process, washing. And I know some people try to skip this or shortcut it. But if you want your flat iron results to actually look good and last, you need clean hair, not hair that has 3 days of styling cream on it, not hair with edge control, residue at the roots, not hair coated in butters, oils, leave-ins, mousse, and random layering from the week before. Clean hair. This is where so many people go wrong. They try to flat iron over buildup, and then they wonder why their hair feels heavy, smells burnt, looks dull, or gets stiff after styling. When you put heat on top of old product residue, you are not creating shine. You are often creating a coating, and that coating can interfere with the way the flat iron glides, the way the cuticle lies down, and the way the hair responds to heat. So I start with a good shampoo. Sometimes that means a moisturizing shampoo if my hair is already fairly clean. Other times, especially if I've had a lot of product on my hair, I'll use a clarifying shampoo first and then follow with something more hydrating. That step alone can make a massive difference because once your strands are truly clean, everything else becomes easier. Your blow dry is smoother. Your flat iron glides better. Your hair has more movement, and you don't need to rely on as much product to fake shine. Then, after shampooing, I move into conditioning. Now, this part is important because a lot of people misunderstand what conditioning is supposed to do before heat styling. You want moisture, yes, but you do not want your hair overloaded. That's where people get confused. They think if their hair feels very soft, slippery, and heavily coated in the shower, that means it's perfectly prepared for heat. But softness alone is not the goal. Balanced, manageable, detangled hair is the goal. I use a conditioner that gives me slip, softness, and detangling without leaving my hair feeling waxy or too coated. I want my strands to feel nourished, but I don't want them drowning in residue because too much richness before flat ironing can backfire. It can make the hair limp. It can make it harder to dry efficiently. It can create heaviness. And when heat hits overly coated strands, the result can be greasy, smoky, or sticky looking hair instead of smooth, airy movement. So while conditioning, I take my time and detangle carefully, and this is something I really want to emphasize. A lot of breakage happens before styling even starts. People blame the flat iron for breakage that actually happened during rough detangling, aggressive brushing, or ripping through knots when the hair was vulnerable. So I always detangle gently from the ends upward, and I never rush that process. Natural hair does not reward rough handling. It responds better to patience and method. Then I rinse thoroughly, and this part matters too. I don't leave a bunch of conditioner sitting on my hair before I go in with heat tools. That may work beautifully for curly styling or wash and go routines, but for flat ironing, I want my hair clean, balanced, and free enough to move. Now, once I get out of the shower, I am very careful with how I dry my hair. I do not rough up my strands with a regular towel. That Aggressive rubbing motion can lift the cuticle, create friction, and start a frizz problem before you've even touched a blow dryer. Instead, I blot or gently squeeze out excess water using a microfiber towel or a soft cotton t-shirt. This may sound like a small detail, but small details matter with natural hair. The more friction you create early on, the harder the rest of the process becomes. And this is where I think a lot of people underestimate what healthy styling actually looks like. Healthy styling is usually not dramatic. It's not some magical secret. It's a series of small, intelligent choices that reduce unnecessary stress. That's really what it is. Now let's talk products before blow drying, because this is where people often overcomplicate things. If you look at some routines online, you'll see people layer leave-in cream, oil, serum, mousse, anti-humidity spray, another cream, and then a heat protectant. And I'll be honest with you, that's usually too much. More product does not mean more protection. In a lot of cases, it means more buildup, more heaviness, more smoke, and a style that doesn't move naturally. So what I like to do is keep this step simple. Usually, I'll use a lightweight leave-in if my hair needs it, and then I use a heat protectant. That's the foundation. And I really want to pause here and talk about heat protectant because too many people still treat it like it's optional. It is not optional if you care about reducing stress on your hair. Now, let me be clear. A heat protectant is not a magic shield. It will not make reckless heat harmless. It will not give you permission to flat iron damp hair at maximum temperature 5 times in a row. But when used correctly, it absolutely helps reduce some of the direct strain of heat exposure. And I focus especially on my mid-lengths and ends. Why? Because those are the oldest parts of the hair. They've been through the most washing, the most combing, the most friction, the most manipulation, and the most exposure to the environment. Your ends have survived the longest. That means they deserve the most respect. So I make sure they are supported. Now here's where the process starts to separate healthy flat ironing from damaging flat ironing, blow drying. This is the part that people rush and then they pay faux or it later. A lot of people want the flat iron to do all the work. That's a mistake. The blow dry stage should do most of the stretching, smoothing, and aligning. The flat iron should be a finishing tool, not a rescue tool. That one shift in mindset changes everything. If your hair is still puffy, uneven, tangled, or damp when you go in with the flat iron, you are automatically going to need more passes, more heat, and more tension to get the result you want. That means more stress on the hair. So I section my hair before I blow dry. And I don't mean lazy sections. I mean actual workable sections. This is another thing people underestimate. Sectioning saves your hair. If your sections are too large, you don't dry evenly. You miss parts of the roots. You create more tangling. And then later, you wonder why the flat iron isn't giving you a smooth result. Smaller controlled sections are not just about neatness. They are about efficiency and protection. Then I make sure I'm drying my hair completely. And I really want to stress this because this is one of the biggest causes of heat damage. Do not flat iron damp hair. Not slightly damp, not mostly dry, not it feels okay. completely dry. If there is moisture trapped inside the strand and you clamp it with high heat, you're putting that hair under major stress. That sizzling sound people sometimes hear, that is not a sign of success. That is not something to celebrate. That is a warning sign. Hair should not be steaming like food in a pan. That is not the goal. So when I blow dry, I use enough tension to stretch the hair, but not so much force that I'm yanking and snapping strands. Some people like a brush attachment, some like a comb attachment, some like a comb attachment, some like a paddle brush. The exact tool is less important than the technique. What matters is control. Whoa. T matters is directing the airflow down the hair shaft to help smooth the cuticle. What matters is not blasting your hair in every direction and roughing it up. And this is another major mistake I see. People use maximum heat on the blow dryer and then maximum heat again on the flat iron. That's too much cumulative stress. Hair doesn't just remember one tool. It remembers all of it. It remembers the blow dryer, the brushing, the tension, the heat setting, the flat iron, the passes, the weather, the friction, the manipulation. Everything adds up. So I try to get my hair stretched and smooth with as little heat as necessary during the blow dry stage. And once my hair is fully dry, I don't rush straight into the flat iron immediately. Sometimes I let the hair cool and settle for a bit. That little pause can help the process feel more controlled, and it also gives me a chance to really look at the hair. Are the roots dry? Are there areas that still need smoothing? Are the ends behaving? Because if something looks off here, I'd rather correct it now than force the flat iron to compensate later. Now we get to the actual flat ironing part. And honestly, this is where people usually get excited, but this is where I become even more disciplined, because this is where overconfidence can quietly create damage. So I section the hair again, and yes, even if I already sectioned it to blow dry, I section it again for flat ironing. Why? Because organization protects your hair. If you're grabbing random chunks and trying to hurry through the process, you are much more likely to overheat some areas, miss others, and keep going back over the same sections. That's how heat exposure adds up without people even realizing it. I usually work from the bottom up and keep my sections small enough that I can actually see through them. That's important. If your section is too thick, the heat won't distribute evenly, and you'll be tempted to do multiple passes to make up for it. So I'd rather do a smaller section once than a giant section 4 times. That's smarter. Now, let's talk temperature, because this is where a lot of people sabotage their hair. Higher heat is not automatically better. That idea has caused so much unnecessary damage. If your hair is fine, fragile, color treated, relaxed in the past, recovering from breakage, or simply not very dense, you do not need to attack it with extreme heat. And even if your hair is thick or coarse, that still doesn't mean burn it until it obeys is a good strategy. What usually matters more than extreme temperature is good preparation. When the hair is clean, dry, detangled, lightly coated, and properly blow dried, the flat iron does not need to fight the hair. That's the difference. I prefer to start lower and only go up if I absolutely need to. Because once you damage the internal structure of the strand, You cannot reverse that with oils, masks, or wishful thinking. You can soften damaged hair. You can make it look better temporarily, but you cannot undo burnt protein. So I'm not casual about heat. Now, one technique I do like when I want a smoother result is the chase method. That's where you use a fine-tooth comb or smoothing comb in front of the flat iron so the strands are aligned as the iron passes through. And when used carefully, it can make a huge difference. It helps reduce puffiness. It helps the hair lay more evenly. And often it means fewer passes. And this is important, it has to be done gently. This is not about dragging the hair aggressively. This is not about creating so much tension that you're pulling your roots out or snapping your ends. The goal is alignment, not punishment. So as I flat iron each section, I move in a steady, controlled way, not too fast, not too slow. And my goal is always to get the result in one clean pass if possible. That is what I'm aiming for. Now, realistically, sometimes a thicker root area or a more stubborn section may need a second pass. That happens. But if I'm needing 3, 4, or 5 passes on section after section, that tells me something in the earlier process was off. Maybe the hair wasn't dry enough. Maybe the section was too large. Maybe I used too much product. Maybe the blow dry wasn't smooth enough. That's why I always say the flat iron tells the truth. It exposes whether your prep was actually good or just good enough to get by. Now let's talk about the ends, because the ends always tell the full story. You can have beautiful roots, sleek mid-lengths, and then the ends tell you exactly what shape the hair is really in. If the ends are thin, rough, split, see-through, or uneven, flat ironing usually makes that more obvious. And this is where a lot of people make a damaging mistake. They keep going over the ends, trying to make them look smoother. That is usually the wrong move. Sometimes the ends do not need more heat. Sometimes they need less denial. That's the truth. Sometimes what your ends need is a trim, not another pass. And I know people hate hearing that because everybody wants to hold on to every inch. But if the ends are damaged enough, keeping them can make the whole style look weaker and can even encourage more tangling and breakage over time. So I'm very careful with my ends. I don't clamp down aggressively. I don't keep reheating them trying to make them perfect. I smooth them once, maybe twice if necessary, and then I leave them alone. Because sometimes doing less is the healthiest thing you can do for your hair. And once a section is done, I let it go. I don't keep touching it. I don't keep saying, maybe just one more pass. That mindset is dangerous because just one more pass repeated over an entire head can quietly become a lot of unnecessary heat. And the scary part is sometimes the damage doesn't show up immediately. That's what catches people off guard. You can finish your style and think everything is fine, and then weeks later you realize your curls are looser, your ends feel rougher, or your hair is snapping more than usual. That's why I don't style based on what looks good for the next 2 hours. I style based on what will still matter 2 weeks from now. That's the difference. Now, once I finish my whole head, I take a step back and actually look at the result, not under flattering bathroom lighting, not under a filter. Real light. How does the hair move? Does it look airy or stiff? Do the roots blend well? Do the ends still look healthy? Because sometimes people get so obsessed with bone straight that they stop asking whether the hair actually looks alive. And I'll be honest with you, I would rather have straightened natural hair with body, softness, and movement than hair that is super flat but clearly stressed. That matters more to me. Now, after flat ironing, this is where a lot of people accidentally ruin the final result with too much product. They start layering oil, serum, edge control, gloss spray, anti-frizz spray, cream, and shine mist on top of already heat-styled hair. And then they wonder why it feels heavy, greasy, sticky, or lifeless. You really do not need a lot after flat ironing. Usually less is better. If I use anything after styling, it's minimal because I want the hair to move naturally. I want softness, not grease. I want shine that comes from smoothness. No. Tea from drowning the hair in oil. And that's another thing I think people need to hear. Oily hair is not automatically healthy hair. Sometimes oily hair is just overloaded hair. Healthy, flat ironed, natural hair should still have lightness, movement, and flexibility. It should not feel like it's wearing a product jacket. Now, the next part is just as important as the styling itself, and that is maintenance. Because what you do after flat ironing can either preserve the health of your hair or slowly wear it down. The biggest mistake I see people make is reflat ironing their hair every single day. That is one of the fastest ways to accumulate heat damage. If the initial styling process was done properly, you should not need to keep reheating your whole head every morning. That's not maintenance. That's repeated stress. So at night, I'd protect the hair. That might mean wrapping it. That might mean pin curling it. That might mean using a satin or silk scarf, bonnet, or pillowcase. The exact method depends on the look I'm trying to preserve. But the goal is always the same. Reduce friction and preserve the smoothness without needing more heat. Cotton creates friction and pulls moisture. That can rough up the cuticle and make your hair lose that polished look faster. So your nighttime routine really does matter. And in the morning, I try to disturb the style as little as possible. Sometimes all the hair needs is to be unwrapped, lightly separated, and maybe gently reshaped in one or two areas. Not a full styling session, not a whole flat iron touch-up. And if there's a little frizz or a little volume, honestly, I'm okay with that because I would rather have a little softness and fullness than keep chasing an unrealistic, perfectly flat look that costs me my hair health. And if the weather is humid, I keep my expectations realistic. Humidity is not your enemy. It's just reality. Natural hair has memory. It wants to move back toward its natural shape. That is normal. So instead of fighting humidity with more heat, I try to prevent unnecessary puffiness with good prep, lightweight products, and protecting the style properly. Now, I also want to say something for anyone who has had heat damage before and is nervous about straightening their hair. Attending that fear makes sense. If you've been through it, you know how frustrating it can be to wash your hair and realize your curls are not bouncing back the same way. That concern is valid. And honestly, a little caution is healthy because heat styling should never be something you do mindlessly if your long-term goal is healthy, natural hair. But I also don't think you need to live in fear of every heat tool forever. What matters more is how you use it. Be strategic. Use heat less often. Use it with intention. Don't style just because you're bored. Don't use the flat iron as a shortcut around good hair care. Use it when your hair is prepared for it. And then respect the process. That's the difference between styling and stressing your hair. One is controlled. The other is careless. And over time, your hair will tell you which one you've been doing. If your hair starts feeling rougher after every straightening session, if your ends keep thinning, if your curls start looking permanently looser, if your hair is losing elasticity or snapping more than usual, those are signs to slow down and reassess. Hair gives feedback. The problem is most people wait until the feedback becomes obvious damage. So the real goal is to listen earlier. And if I had to sum up exactly how I flat iron my natural hair in the healthiest way I know how, it would come down to this. I start with clean hair. I keep the conditioning balanced. I use minimal but useful product. S. I protect the hair from heat. I blow dry thoroughly. I section carefully. I use controlled temperature. I keep passes low. I respect my ends. And I maintain the style in a way that doesn't force me to keep reheating it. That's really it. Not 100 products. Not a miracle serum. Not some secret trick. Just smart, disciplined technique. And honestly, that's what natural hair responds to best. It doesn't need panic. It doesn't need aggression. It doesn't need to be tamed. It needs to be understood. And once you start treating your hair like something valuable instead of something frustrating, your results tend to change. Because the healthiest, flat-ironed, natural hair is not the hair that looks the straightest for one day. It's the hair that still feels strong, still looks full, still has life, and still returns to itself when the style is over. That's the standard I care about. Not just sleek for today, healthy for the long term. If you want, I can also give you